Hello and welcome to Season 4 of the SoundStage Audiophile Podcast. For the past few years, host Jorden Guth has been learning about the who, the what, and the when of hi-fi from the pioneers who made our hobby what it is today, as well as the modern innovators who are constantly striving to push performance to new levels. That's not going to change, but this year he'll also be learning about the other two W's, where your favorite gear is made these days, and why. So with that out of the way, let's see who Jorden is chatting with this time around.
Hello and welcome to the SoundStage Audiophile Podcast. Today we have the man behind the curtain, our producer Dennis Berger, on to talk about an article he recently published that really resonated with me and I think would resonate a lot with the younger hi-fi crowd. Welcome, Dennis.
Thanks, buddy. How you doing today?
Good. Thanks for coming out from behind the curtain.
Yeah, man. It's good to be here.
So I think let's just jump right into it. Basically, you wrote this article and you've already kind of told me that you've had references for why this article came to be. But the article in question resonated with me and I think it'd be an interesting conversation. So yet another Navel-Gazing editorial about boomers, kids, and the future of hi-fi.
How's that for a headline?
That's a tongue twister.
Yeah.
So give us a little bit of like the 10,000 foot view on what this article is about.
Well, the 10,000 foot view is basically like most of my ideas these days. It sort of came from a conversation that Brent and I were having on Audio Unleashed, our podcast, about this article that I think it's supposed to be pronounced headphonesty published, but we call it headphone sty. And my hypothesis, my working hypothesis is that they basically just go find, interesting articles from somewhere else or posts or podcasts or something like that. And they feed that information to a large language model and it spits out an article and then they just copy edit it. But they did this post called, 40% of audiophiles may be gone soon and no one is replacing them. And, that's a pretty common refrain. I mean, we've been seeing people write articles to that effect, although the demographic shifts a little bit for, 30 some odd years now. So Brent and I had a discussion about that, and I had some additional thoughts after we got done recording. So I started writing an article about it. And as I was deep into that, Doug Schneider, the founder of SoundStage, published an article for SoundStage Hi-Fi called New Year's Wake-Up Call for the Hi-Fi Industry, where he was talking about the aging demographics and sort of the problem with where hi-fi is and where it's going. And it just sort of all came together in one stew. And I thought, you know what, I'm gonna get my thoughts on the page here. But I guess one thing that I have to bring to the table, aside from simply just navel-gazing, is the fact that I noticed in the demographics for this headphone style article, they were showing how, the entirety of the audience for this one YouTube video about a Krell amp was like, most of the people watching this video were over the age of 55, right?
Sure.
So I thought, well, what are the demographics for Audio Unleashed like, right? I never really looked into that by age breakdown before. And so I did. I can't look the audio only versions, but we post our podcast on YouTube as well. And I'm looking at it and it's like, wow, we've got a significantly younger skewing audience. Unfortunately, and I hate this, I wish I could do something about it, but it's just as male dominated, almost as male dominated, but we actually have like only 35% of our audience is over 65. And another 35% of our audience is age 35 to 44. And like 15% of our listeners, at least on YouTube, are like in their 20s. And so the demographic, sort of makeup of your average Audio Unleashed listener is significantly younger than all of the demographics we're seeing from this Headphone Style article and from Stereophile, who normally publishes this. So I went to Doug and I was like, Doug, I know I'm asking for some proprietary info here, but like, could you pull demographic information for the SoundStage Network's YouTube channel? Because I have a sneaking suspicion, given that our publications tend to be way more science focused than the norm. And I don't mean in the audio science review sense, but I mean, we tend to put a lot more focus on a combination of the subjective listening and the objective testing, right? And we tend to be a bit more skeptical. And all of those are qualities that I see in my young friends. Like all of my friends under 30 just have a deep distrust of anything marketed, right? They hate marketing, they hate advertising. They just assume most things that are published are a scam, They're deeply skeptical. Does a network like SoundStage appeal to them? And it turns out kind of does. And the more skeptical approach that Brent and I take, it is drawing a younger audience. We are getting the people that your old guard audiophile publications say, hi-fi doesn't appeal to these people. Well, we're kind of proving that it does appeal to those people. So what's going on? And what I really think it just boils down to is, there's a lot of gatekeeping in audiophilia, and I think the gate is being guarded by baby boomers. And it's not so much that they're necessarily protecting some purity of sound reproduction or anything like that. It's just like, no, they want this hobby to be their preferences, their aesthetic, their music, their way of doing things. And all of those things developed in a very different environment. All of those things developed in an era where, there weren't video games, where, there wasn't even home video, I mean, sure, we all had TVs in our, living rooms, but they were pumping out mono sound through one speaker. You couldn't hook a, surround sound system to it. So like a good sound experience was defined by a dedicated stereo system or something like that. And those habits and those proclivities just sort of got baked into everything that the old guard audiophiles consider to be audiophilia. And it's not so much that young people don't care about sound, they just don't necessarily care about doing it the way that boomers think it has to be done, So the question of like, what are we going to do about all the baby boomers dying out? I'm not wishing ill on anybody. I don't want anybody to die. Some of my best friends are boomers. I want them around as long as they can. So don't take this the wrong way, but I don't know if hi-fi enthusiasm and this hobby as a whole can evolve and can adapt until they're gone. Because, and we're going to get into the territory of politics here, but everything is politics these days. They're the only ones with any disposable income. Right?
Yeah.
Generation X
a large
has
majority of the ones with the disposable income, unless they've already passed it down and all that. Yeah.
Generation X, as a rule, has half the wealth of baby boomers. All right. Millennials have half the wealth of Generation X. They climbed to the top by basically fighting capitalism, right? They put constraints on capitalism, and therefore they built up their personal wealth, and they pulled up the ladder after them and went, "Well, capitalism's great." Well, it's anti-capitalism made them rich, and then they were, capitalism's awesome, so now the rest of us are suffering. Young kids don't have money to spend on hi-fi the way boomers do. So if you were a marketing company, you were a hi-fi company, you're making gear for people, are you going to make things and market them to the people who have disposable income or disposable wealth? Or are you going to try to go, market to people who are never, ever going to be able to afford to buy a house for the most part, who are struggling to pay the bills, who are working 3 jobs just to, stay in an apartment that they can't afford? Well, you're going to market to the people with a disposable income. Therefore, there's a feedback loop. This hobby is dominated by their proclivities because they got here first and they staked their territory, and they're the only ones who can spend money on it. So, yeah, you want hi-fi to evolve? I don't think it can right now. I won't say that. I'll say there are forces keeping it from evolving.
Pushing against it, evolving into the degree that it probably could or may.
Yes. Yeah.
So I think after reading your article and reading Doug's article, I think one of the major things that comes out of this to me is hi-fi as a major hobby was generational. It was the baby boomers. It was people like my dad who, and people like Doug who saved up. They bought a system. It was a lot of money, but it was obtainable. It wasn't like outrageously priced to a point of not being able to actually ever envision that being a possibility. But they were able to save up and buy something that they were proud of and continue that on.
Yeah.
To your point, I think the idea of the society in which that happened and that really took place didn't have TVs in every household. Probably didn't have color TVs if they had TVs for the most part. Surround sound wasn't really a thing. Video games weren't really as popular, and even video games that were as popular, like, don't get me wrong, I love 8-bit soundtracks and all that, but it wasn't, the audio wasn't as involved as it is or can be today. And
I mean, I never experienced stereo from a video game until the Sega Genesis.
There you go. That's dating you, man. The Sega Genesis was awesome, but that's
it was, but that was like, what was that? That was my fourth generation video game console. That was the fourth console I had. So like that was deep into that. Gaming had matured by that point to me, right? Before that, all the consoles could only put out mono sound, and that's okay because your TV only had one speaker anyway, so it didn't really matter. So, but these days, I was listening to, I think it was maybe 20,000 Hertz, which is a podcast I really, really love, or maybe it was Imaginary Worlds. But one of them was talking about the fact that if you hear a score today that was recorded with a full symphony orchestra, it's actually far more likely to be a video game score than it is a film score, right? A lot of times film scores are made with, samples, virtual instruments, somebody playing them on a keyboard. But, a lot of, especially like JRPGs and things like that. And, you look at like Baldur's Gate 3 and you again, you have to apply some Bayesian logic here, but if you hear a soundtrack, a score recorded by a full symphony orchestra, it's more likely to be a video game score than a movie score.
That is awesome. And I mean, that checks out. Like, I think of the Halo franchise, which I actually played Marathon, which was precursor to Halo from early 90s and all that, Bungie. Way back in the day. But all of that, like, that's where the money is, and it makes sense. And like the Halo soundtrack, the original one, the subsequent ones are well regarded as like incredible music, orchestra based. But there's so much there to unpack. But I think one of the things is like, okay, so we can all generally agree, hi-fi, generational, baby boomers. And I think
I don't think that's true, buddy. I don't think that's true. I think
where the hi-fi industry started.
I think audiophilia is generational and it's baby boomers. But I think you'll find that a lot of younger people are into high fidelity sound. They just wouldn't consider themselves audiophiles. Right? Yeah. I think that's a distinction worth making.
That is a distinction and makes perfect sense. So if we think about where hi-fi or audiophilia started, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we say, okay, it made sense that became a hobby and that became a thing because records were starting to become readily available, and then cassette tapes, which whatever, and then CDs. And if people didn't have televisions and people didn't have like portable speakers or headphones were as prevalent, or even if they were, they needed something to actually play their music. So that was like the introduction of sound systems, the introduction of a turntable and speakers and all this stuff.
And also there's another aspect to it too. And a commenter pointed this out. Like he was like, my kids don't really put much thought into high fidelity sound, and they wouldn't consider themselves audiophiles because they just take it for granted that with very little effort, they can buy a product that sounds great.
They don't have to get up off their seat to start streaming the latest song from their favorite artist.
But it's not just that. It's that these days there are just a vast amount of really, really great sounding audio products. Whereas 20, 30, 40 years ago, you had to work to achieve good sound, right? Most speakers were bad 40 years ago, right? And there were even, bad electronics and things like that. And it took effort, it took passion, it took dedicated interests to put together a system that sounded good. These days, not so much. There are a lot of really great products, and as long as you're a little choosy, you can buy something that sounds great. So why would you make that part of your identity? Why would you make it in any way, shape, or form an identitarian concern that you have a system that sounds good? Well, great. You bought this product instead of that product, right? Identities don't get wrapped up in that sort of thing. Do you know what I mean?
100%. And I can even think of myself, teenage years and all of that. I don't remember once having spoken to a friend and being like, hey, I got this new CD. Let's go listen to it on my system because it sounds better.
Yeah.
Right? Like that just wasn't a thing. Now, at the time, like headphones were kind of becoming more-ish popular. Like I had the
and
Walkman.
Most of them sucked.
Exactly. Like I had a Walkman and it was those like cheap plastic yellow headphone things that came with it. And like I didn't know any better. And then my dad had a set of Koss, like over-ear, really nice stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a 1/4-inch jack. And if I wanted to use it on my thing, I would need to go to an adapter. And like, was that worth it? No. I'm not riding my bike with that. But when I think about that, you're absolutely right. Like the level of quality of the entry stuff that's available today is so much higher than anything that we've seen in the past generations.
Yeah.
And there's the question, and I kind of was talking to you about this before, where what is considered hi-fi now? So I'll throw this out there. I did a review for the Kef Zeo soundbar. Incredible soundbar. It sounds awesome. And in it, I'm like, is this hi-fi? Like, can a soundbar be a hi-fi thing? Can an audiophile have a soundbar? Like, is that allowed? And I'm like, why does it matter? But also, it's like, okay, there was a lot of benefits of listening to different stuff on the soundbar, but obviously my 2-channel system, I shouldn't say obviously, my 2-channel system, I actually preferred it a lot for listening to music specifically.
Yeah.
There was some differences in SoundStage and a whole bunch of stuff that was really cool on my 2-channel system that was very good on the Zeo soundbar, but not quite that same level.
Sure.
But then I kind of started having all these like self-doubt questions and all this stuff. And it's like, can a Bluetooth speaker be a hi-fi Bluetooth speaker? Or like at what level is a set of headphones hi-fi headphones? And I don't know if there's an answer to that. But I also don't know if like anyone in a younger generation really cares.
Well, it's interesting. You asked, you just a second ago, I think you were repeating yourself, but you weren't. You were contradicting yourself. You said, could a soundbar be hi-fi, right? Could audiophiles be happy with it? Those are two different questions, bud. And I would say, yes, a soundbar can be high fidelity in that it can deliver full range sound with low distortion, good channel separation, no distractions, right? Yes, it can be hi-fi, but no, audiophiles are never going to be happy with it, right? Because audiophilia is not about sound quality. It's about the preferences and proclivities of a certain demographic of people,
It's not about sound quality, it's about sound systems.
I think it's about process. It's about community. It's in which those things are very important, but it is, how many times have I read reviews by audiophiles who just absolutely fell in love with the product. And then you see the measurements of that product, and it's just like, what? There's no way most people would say that sounded good. And if you put that product and another product in a blind test, that product would lose like every single blind test. But for the audiophile, there's a certain, identitarian thing, there's a certain process thing, and for whatever reason, they loved it, But again, it's like, that's why I say we have to start treating audiophilia and hi-fi as two separate things. They overlap. There's definitely a little overlap in that Venn diagram, but they're not the same thing.
Interesting. So maybe what I should have said earlier was hi-fi and audiophilia as major hobbies were generational, but they kind of split off to some degree, whereas audiophilia is that same generation that's kind of continued on, whereas high fidelity and the appreciation of high fidelity audio is continuing to evolve and reaching probably a larger audience than it ever has.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if people know this, but Joseph Taylor of SoundStage Experience is one of my best buddies in the SoundStage network. Joe and I talk all the time. We've even got a signal chat that just goes constantly back and forth. And I was telling, when he read this story, I talk about video games a lot in the story and how important the video game experience is, and how I think, there's an old saying that like anything that exists before you're 30 is just a part of the natural order of things, and anything that's invented after you're 30 is an abomination. And I'm at that weird cusp where I grew up with video games, and they're just kind of another form of media to me. I don't consider them. I play video games every day. I probably play video games more than I, watch movies or listen to music. And yet I don't consider myself a gamer. It's just part of life. They're part of entertainment. They're part of what you do, right? But Joseph is a little older than me, and in many ways that means he's wiser and has more experience. But for him, video games are foreign territory. They're just this weird newfangled thing. He would consider a video game to be an experience more similar to playing Monopoly than watching a TV show, right? Whereas I would put playing a video game in more in the TV show category than playing Monopoly, right? He took issue with me saying that, like, if hi-fi shops were still a thing, and I had, a display set up, like the game Luminous would be part of my demo experience. Like, you want to really understand the benefit of good sound. Like, good sound makes playing this game better, because this game is about creating a physiological, biological feedback loop between yourself, the music, and the gaming system, right? So the better the game sounds, literally the better you perform at this game, right? How could high fidelity sound not be crucial to this experience, right? How could this game not be improved by a well-tuned, well-installed, well-set up stereo or even surround sound system? Like, when you start the game, they're like, guy, like, if you don't have surround sound, put some headphones on when you're playing this game, because like it's crucial to the experience. And Joe was like, I don't see how video games have anything to do with like hi-fi. And I'm like, All right, let me tell you a story about a young comrade who was over at my house the other day, because I don't know if people know this. I'm recovering from heart surgery. I couldn't drive at the time. He came over to take me out to lunch, and I was like, oh, dude, have you played the new Luminous game? And he's like, no. And I'm like, sit down. And so he sat on the couch and like played for a little bit. And he's like totally into it. And it's about time for him to go. And he sort of points at all of my speakers and my surround sound processor and everything like that. And he's like, I got to get me some of this. Like, what do I need? What do I need to buy to have this? And by the time he left, we had already sort of talked about a good receiver for him and not starting with surround sound, because I'm like, you want to put most of your money into your speakers, so let's start you off with a 2.1 system, and we figured out a budget and everything like that. And Joe is just like, I still don't get it. I still don't understand what video games have to do with hi-fi. And I'm like, okay, like like this kid is like, this is the first time he has decided he wants a proper big boy dedicated sound system. It was a video game experience that looped him in. And then when we were talking about systems, he was like, oh, hey, wait a minute. I just thought about something. Could I plug a record player into this system? And I'm like, well, it would be a turntable, not a record player. But yeah, because we spend a lot of time at the local record shop for social events and things like that. And he's like, I've always kind of thought about getting into records, but he's like, but if I get this system, like I could buy a record player from Travis and listen to records in the same system I'm like playing video games on.
I think the main thing there,
the boomers in my life still don't understand that. They don't understand how video games have anything to do with hi-fi. And yet, for the young kids in my life, they don't understand the lack of understanding. They're like, why is this some weird walled-off form of entertainment? It's just entertainment to them. And if
why do I have to listen to just music on these amazing speakers?
Yes.
And I think the main thing there, as you're saying this, is the introduction to good high quality sound. And what I mean by that is like when we think about hi-fi as a hobby and audiophilia as a hobby, like the introduction to that was records. The introduction for Joseph, I feel like we talked to him about it, was records. Like he listened to records and that's what kind of inspired him to get his original system and kind of work up from there.
Sure.
That was based on the period of time. Nowadays, people are into a lot more than just music. People are into videos and TV shows and video games. So whatever it is that gets you into that hi-fi ecosystem, it doesn't matter if it's necessarily music, if it's video games or whatnot, because it can use that same system for all of the above.
Yeah.
And I think that might be one of the major distinctions there. And it's funny because, okay, so let's take this back a step as well. I spoke to you on the phone, I don't know, like a month or so ago, and we were talking about, I'm new to reviewing and I'm trying to review and all this stuff. And
you wanted some pointers and some tips for, like, you wanted a critique of the most recent review you'd done, right?
Exactly. And this was before your article came out as well, because that would have actually influenced me quite a bit. So I wrote the review and recorded the review right after that for this Kev soundbar. And part of my review was actually talking about not only the audio aspect and the video aspect of it, because the soundbar has Dolby Atmos, and it's quite good for even just listening to music on. Great for movies. But I had this like huge section about how I was playing video games with it, and not like a Dolby Atmos scored video game, Tears of the Kingdom, Zelda, with my son. And I was like blown away because Tears of the Kingdom, for those that don't know, Zelda, like amazing score, amazing sound. I traditionally have a 2.1 channel setup, these PSB Alpha IQ speakers connected to the TV, and I'm more than happy with that, and it sounds amazing on that. But the soundbar actually kind of enhanced that quite a bit and gave me a little bit more kind of behind me, which was really cool and really added to that experience. And I wrote a whole bunch of stuff, and then I kind of had that question of like, is this hi-fi? And then I deleted it and I downplayed it entirely. And then I read your article and I'm like, God, I probably should have kept a little bit more of that because it's so true. There's this element of like me second guessing myself, being like, okay, well, maybe it's the audience, maybe it's the product, but do people care about video games? Do people care about movies when they're thinking about hi-fi in the same way? And I think the answer, like reading the article and doing all that, is they're hi-fi enthusiasts. They care about good quality audio, but they would never consider themselves audiophiles or hi-fi enthusiasts because that's just listening to music. That's just a 2-channel setup.
Yeah, and I think that is largely due to the gatekeeping. And is the attitude that video games don't count. Video games aren't proper, source material. That's just a silly little kids thing, You whippersnapper 50-year-olds with your avocado toast playing your little games. What does that have to do with sound? But yeah, I mean,
I thought I was in the generation of avocado eaters because we had this article that was published saying that young people can't afford houses because they eat too much avocado toast. And my wife and I joke about that all the time. We're like, yeah, we can't afford this house. We're eating too much avocado toast.
Anyway. I know. But I think you're hitting on the thing that I'm hitting on here. I mean, I think we're kind of saying the same thing. It is this gatekeeper aspect. It is, you had an experience, right? You had an experience in which higher quality sound reproduction enhanced your experience with a piece of media. And then you let the received wisdom of an older generation gaslight you into believing that experience wasn't as valuable because it didn't fit into their notion of how this hobby is practiced.
Or the media in which should be consumed.
Yeah. Why?
Because there's also that difference between kind of the hi-fi enthusiasts and like movie enthusiasts, cinemaphiles, right?
But should there be?
I don't know. I don't know that I have an answer for that. I can say that, and like I think of people like Paul Hales, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where spending time with him and like getting his sense of like why he makes the speakers that he does, he's like, PA systems shouldn't sound like shit. Restaurants shouldn't sound like shit.
Mm-hmm.
Your home theater setup should sound good.
Yeah.
And the benefits that all of this research and all the development that's gone on in the hi-fi industry can add to the quality of experience for the movie industry, for PA, for restaurants, and I'm trying to think of the term here, but like basically background sounds. So why doesn't it? And why is it kind of seen as multiple different things?
I don't get it. And I think it really is just, my hypothesis is it's the thing that I talked about before. If home video had existed when boomers were in their formative years, if surround sound, and I'm not talking about quad, I'm talking about like good surround sound, had existed in their formative years, then I don't believe these walls would exist. I think it would just be about better sound. But the hobby ossified when video games weren't a thing. The hobby ossified when home video wasn't a thing, And I'm in this weird in-between state, whereas I was very young when all of these things happened, but I remember growing up, I got to see The Wizard of Oz once a year when they showed it on ABC at Thanksgiving. The Wizard of Oz is my favorite movie of all time, by the way. And now I can watch The Wizard of Oz anytime I want. Star Wars, I got to see A New Hope, which was not even called A New Hope at the time, twice before The Empire Strikes Back came out, right? I saw it when it came out, and then I saw it in the re-release, and then, it was, well over a year later before The Empire Strikes Back came out, right? So home video was transformational in terms of, the home media experience, but even home video, for many, many years, watching movies at home sounded like crap.
Yep.
It wasn't until 1994, 95 that I remember getting my first surround sound receiver, and it required, a Laserdisc player with an RF demodulator to make it work. Yeah. And then I remember Dolby Digital came out, and all of a sudden we're getting Dolby Digital ready receivers, and DTS is coming on Laserdisc, but you got to get a new Laserdisc player. But what I'm saying is, like, by that point, by the time that movies at home started to sound good, the hobby was what it is and what it was going to be, right? It hasn't really evolved since. And so these distinctions now that seem really weird and artificial to younger people are simply a consequence of when these things happened.
Interesting.
I
Yeah,
think.
I see that, and then I think of companies companies in the hi-fi space. Let's say
Hmm.
I don't follow the kind of home theater space as much, but like obviously there's some overlap in that.
Right.
And when I think about kind of a phrase that always comes up, it's like as the artist intended and all this, and it is very much geared to music specifically. And I
Mm.
can't think of a lot of companies that kind of show the multiple use cases of their speakers aside from just music listening.
Mm.
And
But again,
maybe
because they are marketing to people who think it's a radically different thing, right?
and
They're
maybe that's it. I don't
marketing
know.
to people who think, oh, this newfangled home video stuff, this surround sound stuff. Look, you know, my buddy Steve Guttenberg, love him dearly. I need to pick up on the phone and call him, by the way. Reminder to self.
Mhm.
But Steve thinks surround sound is just an abomination, man. You know? So again, it's but like why, and it's because his hobbies and his proclivities and his preferences solidified before it was really a thing, you know.
So I'll add to that and I think of like Dolby Atmos especially, is
Mhm.
there's some music that was never designed for it that
Mhm.
people like kind of cram it, how can I put this? When you take let's say a 2-channel stereo recording
Mhm.
and then you do a Atmos upmix
Mhm.
and it doesn't add anything per se, but you
Mhm.
want that Atmos stamp on it, I don't
Right.
think that's doing anybody any like service.
Ooh, of course not.
And I think that's where there's an element, and I agree with this to a huge degree because I've heard some of these recordings on like really nice Dolby Atmos speakers, and I'm like, that doesn't really do anything for me.
But that
It
was true when DVD audio came out, though, and all of a sudden we're remixing music in 5.1. God, a lot of those DVD
same idea.
audios sounded like crap, buddy. I mean,
Yeah,
you're listening to it going, this just ruined the music.
yeah,
It was not recorded to be mixed like this. I mean, it's sort of like it's sort of like listening to the stereo mixes of the original Beatles albums that were only recorded and mixed and mastered in the mono era. It's
yeah,
just like they didn't record them for stereo. They didn't have the stems, man. It just sounds goofy and weird, right? But that doesn't mean stereo is bad, and I know a lot of audiophiles who actually prefer mono. Well,
sure, yeah.
they grew up in that era.
But I will say, so again, in the soundbar review, because this was the most I've ever played with like Dolby Atmos and that, Yellow, Yellow,
Mm.
Yellow, the
Mhm.
Point album, Wabba Dabba,
Yeah, yeah,
dude, like that is a Dolby Atmos mixed album.
yeah,
That sounds freaking amazing.
yeah,
Like it's so cool.
yeah.
And I even put it on my PSP Alpha IQ system, and it still sounds good. Like it's still good. There's no like I'm not throwing shade on it in a 2-channel or 2.1 channel setup, but like with that Dolby Atmos, when you start getting like these random like sound bites coming up to you from what seems like the ceiling,
Mhm.
it's really cool.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
and I guess all of that is kind of getting to this idea of like, what does the artist actually intend? And is the artist just a musician? And then
I'm
should companies maybe push a little bit more towards the multi-use aspect of their speakers?
I mean, I think some musicians care and some musicians don't. I think some musicians are have very definite ideas about how the sonic experience should be shaped, you know? And some of them are just interested in the composition, and they're trying to convey different things than a sound experience. So I don't know if it really makes sense to apply any sort of universal truths to that question. I think it depends, but I guess my take on it is a little different. My take on it is good sound always matters, right? And and I believe it is genuinely important. Because I believe that all of us love good video. Like all of us love seeing a good TV, what have you. But I don't know that I need to be careful how I phrase this because I very much value high quality video reproduction. And, given my druthers, I want to have a higher resolution television with a higher color gamut and better consistency and things like that. But video does not have the same physiological impact on us that audio does. I think good full range 20 to 20 neutral sound reproduction with good dynamics, good SoundStage and imaging, no distractions, good setup, good room acoustics has an impact on you physiologically, right? It has the power to calm you when you're not calm. It has the power to excite you when you're not excited. It high quality audio reproduction can, in a sense, program you in the most fascinating psychological ways. There are times when I need the music and there are times when I need the recording, and I'd rather have both at the same time. I'd rather have my music always sound as good as it possibly can. But there are times when I really I don't need to just hear this song. I need to be bathed in it. I need it to wash over me. I need to be inside it. And that can change my body in fascinating ways that video just doesn't, right? And so I guess what I'm saying is these distinctions, these walls that we're talking about, I want them broken down. I want them to go away because I don't care what media you are interacting with. I literally, and I truly believe this. This is not, my spiel. This is not a line. I literally believe this with all of my heart. Better quality audio reproduction makes your life better. I believe if we all had access to higher quality, higher fidelity audio reproduction, we would in some way, shape, or form legitimately be better off, right? And so that's why I get frustrated with these distinctions and this gatekeeping. And that's why I get frustrated with people who say video games don't count as hi-fi. I get frustrated with this wall between movies and music and things like that. And I understand they're mixed differently. They're mixed for different environments, what have you. There are peculiarities that matter. But what I'm saying is watching The Wizard of Oz on a tablet or my phone or something like that, or TV speakers, heaven forbid, or in a crappy movie theater. I've watched The Wizard of Oz in many a crappy movie theater, right? And it is just not, there's just something lacking about it. But you watch The Wizard of Oz with a truly high quality sound system, true high fidelity sound. And I'm sorry, it just makes your life better. It just does. It physiologically transforms you. So I want as many people as possible to have access to as high quality audio reproduction as possible. And so I have no patience for these walls and these distinctions that to me just are silly and don't matter.
No, I mean, there's a common thing that's said in video, which is audio makes up 50% of the video experience.
Yeah.
Makes sense. I mean,
yeah.
So I fully agree on that. I think for me, one of the takeaways that I have is that, well, there's a couple. I think companies may benefit in exploring more kind of media that people use to get into high fidelity audio. So when I think about all these different companies, and we've been there, I haven't had one experience where a company kind of advertises kind of speakers as being useful for playing games or even home theater stuff. Kind of like I think of Arendal Sound from Norway. They are amazing high fidelity speakers. A lot of people use them in their home theater setups, and they have this not an identity crisis by any means. They know exactly what they're doing, but I remember them talking about the idea that people just think that they're home theater speakers and don't consider them hi-fi. I'm like, well, why not? And they're like, well, we're trying to change that. It's this idea that it can only work for one and not the other that I think needs to
And that is
that you can
profoundly
explore.
silly on the face of it. Like what in what way, shape, or form could that, I mean, how does that even work? I mean, how could a speaker possibly sound good with a movie and not sound good with music? You know what I'm saying? I mean,
Yeah.
you could argue that maybe a setup, a system that is geared around making sure that multiple listeners in a room in a variety of seating positions still have an experience where dialogue is centered on the screen and they're getting an expansive front and surround sound stage, or with Atmos, overhead, whatever. Maybe setup comes into play, but what could be different about the speaker? They both need, neutrality, good dispersion. I mean, it's good crossover design is good crossover design. Good driver design is good driver design. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Again, it goes back to just this mythology that's based, I think, largely in the fact that this, home theater is a newfangled contraption, man. But again, I want you to imagine something. I want you to imagine going to Munich, high end. Oh, it's not Munich anymore, is it? Imagine going to high end and walking into a room and you've got just a baller sound system with a TV connected to it and a PS5, and they're playing Luminesce Arise, right? Imagine the writers for the Absolute Sound and Stereophile walking into that room. They'd have kittens on the spot, and they would walk out of the room like, this is a travesty. How dare you sully my hi-fi with these silly little games, So again, there's a problem with how our companies who have to chase the disposable income of boomers because nobody else has got disposable income, how could they possibly start appealing to anybody else when those people are not merely neutral to the forms of media that younger people consume, they're actively hostile to it. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, how are you gonna survive as a company that needs to make money when the people with the money are forcing you to stay in a rigid little box that doesn't appeal to the next generation of people? It's a trap.
Interesting.
How do they get out of it?
I don't know the answer. I mean, there's a million different potential ways to approach it. I think for me, generally, what I can do is look at things a little bit more broadly than hi-fi. And then for any reviews that I do going forward, I'm going to try and take more of that approach to
Let me put you
integrate
on the
some of the other
spot,
stuff in
bud.
there.
Let me put you on the spot.
Hit me.
What does high fidelity mean to you? Like, describe the components of high fidelity sound.
Ooh. So for
You
me,
keep asking the question of, is this hi-fi? But like, what metrics are you going by? What would be required for it to cross some threshold into a territory where you're like, oh, now this is high fidelity sound?
yeah, and I think so. Previously, I would probably have put it to a price point. I would say spending X amount of money, and I don't know what that price point is, but I would say spending X amount of money, you're getting into like hi-fi territory there. And I think over the years of being in a really amazing, fortunate position to go to these companies and talk to the different peoples that make these products, I would say it's the production of speakers and technology that get the absolute most out of the laws of physics and all of that stuff to produce a sound that is kind of, I don't want to say breathtaking. I don't want to use any of these words that are just fluff, but that invoke the emotion that the music or the content was intending to provide. And again, that's kind of all this fluff stuff. But I guess what I'm getting at is, like, when I think about some of these speakers, like, I've had 5.1 channel setups before, like moving out of my parents' house for the first time and having a little bit of space and getting a cheap like Samsung or Sony, whatever it was, like home theater in a box and plugging that in. And I mean, that was cool, but I don't really consider that hi-fi. I don't really consider it high fidelity. I remember being like moderately impressed by the effect, not by the performance, if that makes sense. Whereas when I put on, like, let's say these Alpha IQ speakers that I typically have set up, or when I did that KEF soundbar, or the WLA, the Phantom 98 dB speakers, I would consider those all hi-fi in the sense that their sound reproduction kind of left me the impression or left me feeling good. So that's very subjective, but I mean that's kind of the way that I think about it.
I'm reminded of the concept. You've heard of AGI, right?
AGI. No.
AGI is artificial general intelligence, and it is a phrase that is used as a point of distinction from things like the generative adversarial networks and large language models and things like that, like GANs and like LLMs are very specific. But AGI in the past has been generally understood to mean an artificial intelligence that is comprehensive, that is, in a sense, doing all of the things that a sentient being could do. So it's not just trained to do, statistical likelihood calculations on language to guess what word comes next, right? It is truly comprehending language, right? So artificial general intelligence would be what we would consider to be an intelligent system, not just AI that can do this thing, right? So we've always made this distinction. Once we reach a certain threshold of simulated sentience, then we've reached AGI. Well, in the past few years, all of the AI companies have changed that and now define AGI as basically a neural network that generates a certain amount of revenue. Once this thing is creating $100 billion of revenue, we'll call that AGI. Well, that's nonsense. That's not a metric, And so, have I ever told you about my distraction model of high fidelity?
No. Distraction model of high fidelity does sound awesome.
Yeah, I mean, look, all of the things that I talked about before matter: full range sound, neutrality. In other words, flat anechoic frequency response, good dispersion, good dynamics, driver to driver consistency, good crossover design. All of these things, are the components of hi-fi that matter to me. But ultimately, I think high fidelity sound, whether you really understand any of that, because any deviations from any of those things distract you. Non-neutral frequency response distracts you, because our movies and music and video games are all mixed on systems with neutral frequency response. And so then you go and you play them back on a speaker that doesn't have reasonably neutral frequency response. And you get into the element of, I'm hearing things I've never heard before. Well, yeah, because you're boosting or recessing certain frequencies. You are becoming distracted by the reproduction of that sound because it deviates from linearity, from high fidelity, right? If your dynamics are compressed, if your driver compresses, at loud volumes and things like that, if your dispersion is such that the character of the sound reflecting off of your walls doesn't match the direct sound, that's distracting, and therefore it pulls you out of the experience. All of those things are distractions. So people are constantly writing in and ask me, like, how can I improve my sound in my system? Okay, what's drawing your attention? Like, what is distracting you? Let's fix that. And the fewer distractions you have when you're engaging with your sound system, the higher fidelity it is, in my opinion. So I call it the distraction model of hi-fi.
Interesting. I like that.
Yeah. And more often than not, we're distracted by colorations or limitations,
I wonder if that's one element of it, because if you put then a visual aspect into there, the potential for distraction increases quite substantially. So maybe that's part of the reason why hi-fi enthusiasts want to eliminate that. Or audiophile enthusiasts want to eliminate that to remove the distraction. But I think that is probably an entire other podcast in and of itself.
That is a whole other, might be a season of podcasts, man. Hey, we're coming up on season 5. We got to start recording a new intro and hashing out our theme and planning some episodes, man, because we're coming up on it. We've got like one more episode in season 4, I think.
Think so, maybe 2.
Yeah.
Maybe 2. We might stretch it to 2. Yeah. Because we have a couple ideas that are in the works. But that's a really good point. We should look at that.
Cool.
Okay, so finishing it off, I'm going to ask the standard question here, but let's switch it up a little bit. So maybe instead of an album or an artist, what is one piece of media that you've heard recently that you've been jiving with or you were impressed by?
Well, the video game Luminessa Rise, which I talk about so much in this article, is just, man, that's my happy place right now. Because like I said, you get into this crazy physiological feedback loop where the more engaged you are with the music, the better you perform at the game, in which case the music changes. And all the while you're sort of playing a puzzle game that is kind of like Tetris, but not exactly like Tetris. If you've never experienced it before, there's nothing quite like it. And that is something else I think people should experience. But there's another one. There's a Norwegian singer that I'm just absolutely obsessed with named Aurora. And it's like every album that she puts out becomes like my new favorite album that week. But her last solo album came out a couple of years ago, What Happened to the Heart? And she made a concert film out of it. And it is it's going to be out in theaters around the time this episode comes out. So my wife and I are actually taking our first vacation in 10 years. And it just so happens that we're going to be coming back through Birmingham on the day when they're showing this concert film. So I'm going to get to see that. But that's not what I was building to. What I was building to is she's got a new album coming out with Tom Rowlands of the Chemical Brothers, because they're big fans of each other. Like, one of the first pieces of music that she ever really sort of identified on her own and fell in love with was the Hannah soundtrack. And then he saw her, I think, at Glastonbury and was just immediately obsessed with her when she was like 17 or 18. And he like sent her an email and they became friends, and they've worked on, he did a little bit of instrumentation on her last album, but they are now releasing an album together. And it's Tom Rowlands and Aurora, and they've split their name up, and the act is called Tomorrow, and their album comes out next month. And there have been like 3 singles released so far, and I'm just positively obsessed with all of them, and I cannot wait for this album. So it's Aurora. If you've never heard her music before, she's this very she's an incredible singer. She doesn't use vibrato. She's got a very clean, pure tone. Her voice is unlike anything you've ever heard before. It is truly angelic, and I mean that in every meaningful sense of the word. And then, Chemical Brothers, Tom Rowlands, very sort of aggressive, beat-driven, very raw electronica. So you put those two together and it's quite unlike anything. And they're both making music that sounds like nothing either of them has ever done individually before. And I'm just obsessed with every new track that they release. So it's called Tomorrow, Tomora.
Amazing. Well, I'm going to check that out. I'm already on her artist page on Spotify, so I'm going to check out that and follow along.
Cool.
Thank you, Dennis.
Thanks, buddy.
Great talking to you, and till the next time, all the best.
Peace out, brother.